Between 1650 and 1800, Europe experienced a significant increase in literacy due to the rise of children's education, which was largely a result of the Age of Enlightenment and the new educational philosophies. In 1600, only a small percentage of men in France, Scotland, and England could read. Less than a quarter of men in each population were able to do so. However, by 1800, literacy rates were growing. Over half of the men across the three countries were literate. Not only did men's literacy increase, but women's did as well. However, it did increase much more slowly than that of men. The rising literacy led to a great increase in reading among the people. But despite all the introductions of various genres, the Bible remained the most favored and widely read book, especially in Protestant regions. However, ordinary people also loved cheap pamphlets called chapbooks. They were printed on low-quality paper, and they contained Bible stories, prayers, and moral lessons that helped people cope with the struggles of daily life. These chapbooks were not the only source of escape from reality. Many Europeans also enjoy humorous and entertaining stories, and these were very popular too. Entertainment was found in fairy tales, medieval romances, and crime stories, which were brought by passing peddlers. Some literature was entirely practical. They instructed individuals in gardening and housework. On the other hand, almanacs featuring calendars and additional farming tips, as well as and jokes, were extremely popular among all classes, both the wealthy and the common. Although most peasants never read the Great Enlightenment books, the ideas still reached them through gossip, cheap pamphlets, and news passed by servants who traveled between city homes and rural villages. Some ordinary working people fully embraced Enlightenment ideals, like Thomas Paine, who in the colonies published Common Sense in 1776. His pamphlet sold 120,000 copies, emphasizing independence from British rule and attacking the power of long-held traditions and the evils of government against the natural society of men. Through these popular literary genres, including chapbooks, almanacs, and simple yet knowledgeable pamphlets, popular literature reshaped European life.
Although literacy rates in Western Europe improved dramatically during this time period, rural village culture remained largely oral and rooted in tradition. For example, neighborhood women often gathered to weave and spin thread while talking, laughing, and sharing news. Occasionally, a young man might be called to the gathering so that the women could judge whether he was a suitable match for their daughters. Men, on the other hand, spent much of their leisure time singing and drinking with friends in the local tavern, which was considered to be an essential feature of village life. In contrast to this, towns and cities offered much more diverse forms of entertainment, including theaters, public gardens, and lively fairs featuring acrobats, exotic animals, and magic shows. As commercialization expanded during this time period, public interest in spectator sports like horse racing and boxing increased as well, which generated significant profits for organizers through ticket sales. As a result, many athletes and performers rose to prominence, turning some into admired public figures. Blood sports, which involved the public torture of animals for entertainment, became very popular among the masses. These matches were often accompanied by heavy betting and gambling, which increased the excitement and risk. Popular recreation in early modern Europe was also closely tied to religious life. Carnival, a long-standing Catholic tradition, took place just before Lent, which was the 40-day period of fasting and prayer. It featured lots of drinking, dancing, costumes, and playful reversals of roles in which peasants acted as nobles and men dressed as women. However, by the late 18th century, educated elites who had once enjoyed these festivities began to criticize them as disorderly and outdated. Influenced by church campaigns against pagan customs and by new Enlightenment ideals that supported rationalism, they pushed to limit noisy celebrations and discourage carnival practices.
Between 1650 and 1800, Europe's everyday diet slowly began to change, but one thing stayed the same. Bread was the center of everyone's diet. Most ordinary families relied on bread for almost every meal. In France, a peasant might eat 2 pounds of bread a day. Since most peasants had to buy grain, they strongly believed in the concept of moral economy and just price, the idea that food prices should be fair to both consumers and producers. So when costs rose above their perceived price, angry crowds sometimes stormed the markets in bread riots. Besides bread, peasants ate vegetables like peas, beans, cabbages, and carrots. Fresh vegetables and fruits were for summer, and in winter these vegetables were used in soups and stews. Peasants usually did not drink milk since it was too precious. Instead, it was turned into cheese and butter and sold to pay rent and taxes. Meat became a rare luxury in the 1700s as it had become more expensive. Strict hunting laws declared that only nobles were allowed to hunt animals, like deer or rabbits. But diets were not the same everywhere. In towns and cities, town traders and artisans had a little more variety because markets offered a wider range of vegetables, fruits, and some meats. The wealthy ate completely differently, and their meals were very extravagant. Rich Europeans held long dinners loaded with meat, fish, sauce, wine, and sweets. It was common to spend over 5 hours straight eating at dinner. By the 18th century, Europeans' diets were going through significant changes. New farming methods meant more vegetables in cities, such as those in England and the Low Countries. New crops from the Americas were being introduced, like corn, squash, tomatoes, and most importantly, the potato. The potato was groundbreaking. It offered more calories and vitamins than grain, and soon it became a key food for the poor and much of Europe, especially during the winter. Global goods imported from abroad also had a significant impact. Items like tea, coffee, sugar, chocolate, and tobacco shifted from elite luxuries to daily elements for the lives of all classes. Though these products were originally expensive, often due to enslaved labor, their prices decreased from abundance. The reason for their popularity of these once luxurious items was because of the desire to copy elite habits and imitate upper-class lifestyles. By the 1800s, Europeans were eating in ways that were noticeably different than before.
During this time period, people began to use clothing to stand out from their peers and as a form of self-expression. While women wore brightly colored articles of clothing, men typically wore dull and dark colors. Merchants now use new technology to increase their demand and appeal to customers. They began to implement fancy boutiques with large windows, especially due to the patronage of princesses and princes. A big switch in this time period is how merchants began to control the fashion world instead of courtiers. There was a substantial increase in consumption in the fashion industry, which can be attributed to the decrease of cotton fabrics due to cheaper dyes, imported goods, and women working in textiles. The colonies in South America provided Europe with more variety and lower prices, which allowed people to imitate the elite, which was widely sought after in this time period. While this challenged the social order, it also increased the value of clothing and diversity, specifically in 1700 to 1789 in Paris, France. People also began to assign names and functions to rooms as a new form of privacy. Many citizens purchased more plates, furniture, and glassware, and this increase in cutlery and plates gave people the opportunity to eat from their individual plates. Glassware and windows were also improving in production, which allowed clearer and more light to come in. The Enlightenment encouraged people to bathe frequently and properly, leading to both bodily and public hygiene increasing, as well as officials properly cleaning city streets. Throughout 1700 to 1789, Paris saw a substantial rise in value and diversity of clothing and fashion. As prices fell and consumption rose, individuality, comfort heavily impacted and reformed European life.